happy to be here again on another Saturday to facilitate another Wellbeing at Home live session. So big thank you to those of you who've sent messages of encouragement and appreciation. I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer everybody this week. I'll try and get to those during the week. And it really feels like these sessions are making a difference to many of you during these unsettling times. So that's exactly what we wanted to do with them, and also help you empower your own well-being journey. And so yeah, thanks for the messages. They're really motivating us to continue, and we'll definitely continue throughout lockdown and even maybe beyond. We're reviewing that. We'll see how that goes, and we'll probably ask you after lockdown if that's something you'd like us to continue with. So for today, we're covering the topic of Ayurveda, and I was always drawn to this system. It's an ancient health system because for me it seems really logical. It's all about achieving kind of equilibrium and balance, so that we don't get sick, rather than like in our current medical practice treating our illness. This is more about prevention, so kind of avoiding illness. And I didn't realize how beneficial it was actually until I did an intensive Ayurvedic program myself in India for the first time many years ago. And I came back feeling amazing, very revitalized, and full of life and health, and very vibrant. And I remember actually somebody asking me when I got back if I'd had some cosmetic work done, which really made me laugh, because it's the complete opposite. Ayurveda is the complete opposite of that. But anyway, then I became a convert, and I kept returning to India and Sri Lanka to do more Ayurveda over the years. And I also love Ayurveda because it's really gentle and harmonious. It's kind of like, you know, it harmonizes with nature in a way. And so it doesn't feel like one of those grueling, difficult regimes, and it just feels a bit more nurturing. So you feel actually quite pampered when you're doing an Ayurvedic regime, rather than, you know, putting yourself through something very difficult. So I mentioned in the newsletter that was sent out that I met Dr. Mathew, today's guest, at the Ananda in the Himalayas. And I really loved his common sense approach. We were just chatting about it before we started the session. I remember I was having some real bad lower back issues, and you know, people had told me all kinds of things about, oh, well, it's your kidneys, or it's this, or it's that. And I'd got myself in a bit of a tizzy about it. And Dr. Mathew just gave me a really logical perspective. And he's like, Stella, you need to stop doing these detoxes because you're eating too much fiber, and the small intestine is putting pressure on your lower back. And it just made it so simple. And I was like, okay, thank you so much. And I stopped doing the high fiber detoxes, and I haven't suffered since. So it was just very, you know, really logical and common sense. And that for me epitomizes Dr. Mathew. So I'm really happy he's here today, because we're lucky. Oh, you can't hear me. Can everyone hear me? No? Okay, I'm just getting a message that the audio is breaking up. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, I'm really happy he's here today, because he's great, and he's one of the leading voices in Ayurveda here in the UK today. So we're lucky to have inherited him from India. One of the challenges I did face with Ayurveda and doing Ayurvedic regimes is that I always found it difficult to continue when I got home, because, you know, like you go to these Ayurvedic retreats and they really look after you, and they give you the right food and the right treatments and the right herbs and all of those things. But it's always been quite tough for me to continue with that when I got home. So I'm quite excited about today's session, because Dr. Mathew is really going to share with us how we can bring Ayurveda into our homes in his common sense, logical approach, down to earth approach, and you know, kind of understanding our own dosha, you know, tailor our own approach so that we can get the best out of it when we're at home. So hopefully you've looked at that short questionnaire that we sent out to get an idea what your dominant dosha is, your constitution. Dr. Mathew is going to go through that with us as well. So before I hand over to Dr. Mathew, I just actually want to introduce you to Artemis from our own team, our Wellbeing Escapes team, and she's also a Ayurvedic practitioner. So she studied Ayurveda here in the UK for 6 years, and she regularly gives us tips in the team on this subject. So she helps us along internally. But Artemis, please feel free later to ask Dr. Mathew anything that you would like to. So Dr. Mathew, over to you. Just before I do hand over, please everyone keep your microphones on mute because it can affect the sound. I know there were some messages coming up there. If you have questions, put them in chat. If you have questions, put them in chat. Or when we get to the questions part, you can feel free to vocalize your question as well. I saw a message there saying, a text saying, if we didn't receive the questionnaire, I'll just share that with you from our webpage on the chat now as Dr. Mathew starts, so you can refer to that. So Dr. Mathew, over to you.
Hello, namaskar. Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Stella, for that introduction and also inviting me to this chat. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Yes, good. So, like what Stella was already mentioning, Ayurveda feels quite effective, simple, common sense when you're doing it somewhere, when somebody is guiding you. But when you're back home on your own, trying to apply it in your daily life at home, sometimes it feels a little bit too much confusing or too much to actually apply. So my goal today is to make it as simple as possible, not go into the too much of Sanskrit and depths of the concepts, but try and make all those things practical, simple, and easy to apply. And I think it makes sense also because if you really ask me, Ayurveda is an ancient science, which there are written proof of that being existing in actual practice in India more than 2000 to 3000 years. And all throughout this time, I don't think Ayurveda flourished and existed as a science that is practiced through hospitals or huge institutions. Ayurveda used to be practiced in every home. Ayurveda used to be guided by one person who is elderly and knowledgeable in the house, whether it's a grandparent or somebody in the village who knows well about these basic knowledge, and then guide everybody else to apply it in their daily life. So it almost survived most of this time as a very sophisticated way of home remedy in a way. And in time, it was also applied into various health concerns and health issues, and see how these health issues develop and how we can tackle these before it reaches its full extent, so that we are almost preventing it and trying to sort of support the system in healing itself. So if I really think about Ayurveda, I would say that there are three very important qualities of this science. One, it is like Stella was mentioning, it is focusing majorly on prevention. It's not always about dealing with the symptoms using a plant-based remedy. It's mostly about understanding that these symptoms are happening due to this particular change happening within the system, and how we can support, how we can prevent this from happening. And the second factor, which is very effective in terms of Ayurvedic remedies, that it supports the body's natural healing system. So if there is an infection, the healing through Ayurveda will happen when the immunity is supported. It's not by that medicine taking care of the fever symptom or the cold or flu related symptoms. So it supports the entire body to deal with this particular illness. And that has a huge advantage, because if you're taking medicine for a symptom. Once the medicine is stopped, your body is clueless, doesn't know how to deal with that when it happens again. Whereas if you enrich your body's ability and support the system, you always have that learning experience and you know how to respond to a similar situation in the future. And I think the third uh, factor which I always see is really important from an Ayurvedic doctor's perspective is that Ayurveda can be in a way a bit predictive also. We can act like predictors. We can predict what might happen in your body system looking at what's happening right now. So for example, if a person has certain imbalances or signs or symptoms within their body, we can predict that there is a higher chance that this person might get, say, osteoporosis or the diabetes or certain metabolic issues. We can sort of use that prediction to take steps and actively focus on prevention. And it's not actually purely about making random predictions based on very simple concepts and science, which understands that there are changes happening in the body within a particular day or within the weather changes has an influence, age has an influence. So looking at all those factors, you can understand that this person is right now here and he or she might tilt as age progress towards this particular imbalance more and more, and might have an issue related to movement or metabolism at this time. So it's important to take precautions. So prediction is very important, especially right now we are in the middle of a crisis. And if you really think about it, or the whole scientific system, the researchers, everybody is focusing on finding out a treatment or a vaccine for this one particular virus. And if you really think about it, that's the most logical thing to do now. But it's just one virus, it's just one tiny organism. And there could be many like that. And it, by chance, if there is a different variety of that even coming to infect us, these solutions might not be enough. So, what really helps is a risk assessment. Like we now know that certain age groups, certain health issues might actually get, there is a chance that they are more vulnerable to this particular issue. That risk assessment is almost equivalent to the predictive nature of Ayurveda. By doing an Ayurvedic assessment, you're also predicting that you have certain risk towards certain health issue. When you have an imbalance related to air, which I will explain in detail, air usually creates that cold, dry nature and may create joint related issues. So in future, if you're about to not take care of your movements, if you're not taking care of your nutrition to help your bones and joints to nourish, then you are in that risk category where you will get a osteoporosis or arthritis, or that sort of different issues related to movement. Or if you are more naturally having a tendency to gain weight or have more oily tendencies, a mucousy nature, we call it as kapha, where your upper respiratory tract is the most vulnerable. That means that any such infection, not just this one particular virus, any such infections or climatic changes, pollens, allergens, anything could actually affect you first before it affects someone else. So it's really important to analyze yourself for not just following a routine, but also to understand what might be its utility in future, predict your own health. It's not that comes from a doctor. It can be analyzed by your own experience. So you can support yourself, you can protect yourself, and you can also do a self risk assessment to understand where you need to reinforce rather than following the most trendiest kind of supplement. You can follow what's actually really good for you. Right. So that's the introduction. Now, coming to Ayurveda, like Stella said, I practiced. I was mostly practicing in India until 2016. Then I moved to UK, and I think I've learned to explain Ayurveda in a slightly more simpler terms gradually. And if somebody asks me what is Ayurveda, my simplest answer is Ayurveda is a user manual. Have you heard of user manual? It comes with fonts and electrical equipments and everything. So Ayurveda is a user manual for your body. Now, if we take the example of a phone, say there can be different kinds of phone and there can be different platforms like iPhone or Android, and it could be Microsoft, and they all have similarly looking user manuals, but inside there might be differences on what are the main components of this particular electrical object. Here it's phone, or what are the ways of using applications and softwares and all these basic factors related to its function, and how to take care of if something goes wrong, how to troubleshoot, whom to call, what to change. All these things are slightly different in each one of them, and they are all in effect phone. So the same way, Ayurveda also has a user manual for each one of us, but based on what's our internal system and our nature and our natural tendencies, the ideal way of using your own body and maintaining it in good equilibrium, like Stella was saying, is very different from one person to another. So the trick that we need to learn is to filter out all the health related information we gain from all these talks, internet, reading, all of that, and try and see where we are. It's very important to see how our body responds to each one of them and try find out what's best for us. So it is definitely a strenuous effort to find out what exactly works for us, and it might feel like the only way to know that is trial and error by trying out, like Stella did with all the detox. So it can feel like that, but with a certain principle or science, like in this case I will explain Ayurvedic concepts, you can actually make you can assume that this might be good for you and this might not be, based on a majority of information that you gain from your body. So what we try to do through that questionnaire, which some of you have got, is to understand that body exhibits certain tendencies, and by looking at the majority of those tendencies, we are trying to predict the rest of it, and then we apply, and then we see how our body responds to it. And that's also not that whatever the questionnaire says is final. It just says that that's the direction that we are trying to apply. Now, what will be that basic concept? I will explain, which helps us understand what is good for us and what is not. The basic concept is the dosha concept. Some of you might have heard the three doshas, or three body types, or three energies, three bioenergies. It's called in different ways. But I think the core behind this concept is that we are part of the nature, the environment, and the nature influences our body in various ways. Our body responds to different stimulus from the nature, and that variations can be in a certain fashion which can be predicted, and we can actually analyze how our body will respond in the future based on how it is responding to some of the stimulus that we experience every day, whether it is temperature or whether it is affinity to certain food or the way we respond to stress conditions. So the three doshas are looking at the body and trying to simplify how the body functions and interacts with the nature. And when I say simplify, it's really simplifying. It's the most I think you can simplify. You can't simplify more than that, because the three doshas basically say that the body in general has only three set of functions happening inside. We know there is lots of different tissues, organs. Each and every organs have different um, uh, tissues underneath, and there are multiple chemicals and hormones and enzymes, all of that functioning. It's such a complex system, our body. But Ayurveda says that there are only three set of functions, and it's simplified, and simplified in a way that you'll understand when you actually listen to the whole concept. You will understand that it makes sense to simplify it, because then you will get the power, you will get the ability to apply it in daily life. It's not for treatment of a one particular ailment. It is for maintaining your own health in varied environmental situations. So um, the first function that we look at in anybody's body is simply movement. So some of you might know about doshas. So I hope it will give you a little bit more simpler perspective towards understanding it. And some of you who don't know still will be able to understand. I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So the first function we see in our body is movement. And when we say movement, it's not just the physical part of it, not just the bones and the joints and the um, nervous system and all the physical movements with our hands and feet and all our body. It's also related to movement of food through our digestive system, movement of blood through our circulatory system, movement of thoughts inside our mind, uh, any form of movement happening into the cell, coming out of the cell. So absorption of different nutrients into the cells, or removing all the toxins after metabolism from each individual cells, any form of movement physically or within the mind, we categorize it together and call it by one name, and that name is Vata. And Vata is a Sanskrit word. It's in English Vata, and the Sanskrit meaning of the word is like air. Vata means it's like air. Air is always moving, light, and it helps with that motions and the uh, um, any form of movement in the body or the mind. We consider it as the Vata related function. The second set of function which we see inside our body is transformation or metabolism. We call it as Pitta. Pitta is Pitta, Pitta. Sounds like pita bread with one extra T. Easy way to remember it. Pitta represents any form of transformation. It can be uh, the most basic one is how food is converted into energy and different nutrients that is necessary for building up our tissue, to very complex changes happening inside our cells, our mitochondria, different metabolic changes happening in our body, functions of different enzymes, different hormones, all the transformation and changes happening in our body and also in our mind. So Vata creates that thought process which is constantly moving, very, very creative, very light, like air. Whereas Pitta is very transformative kind of thinking. So it's related to a certain outcome, certain goal. You always think and lead to a certain outcome. It's mostly problem solving, logical analysis, that kind of a thinking which is focused. And that sort of a change which is happening in the physical body, we combine it together and call it by the name Pitta. And the third and the final, only remaining function in our body, we call it by the name Kapha. Kapha is Kapha. Kapha basically indicates like Vata is representing the effect of air and air-like qualities in our body, and Pitta represents fire and heat and that fire-like transformative qualities. Kapha represents the water and the earth, the heavier elements from the nature, and you're seeing the cohesive and nourishing qualities of water and earth. So it helps with tissue nourishment, it helps with the maintenance of structure and cohesion within our body and tissues. Kapha is necessary for nourishing our body through our respiratory apparatus, breathing. Uh, Kapha is necessary for tissue repair. Kapha is necessary, and nourishing aspect is necessary for our memory, calmness, groundedness, any form of uh, heavy, nourishing qualities that we can relate to water and earth in the nature happening inside the body, that's categorized together as kapha. So, in effect, what we are saying is we are almost a reflection of what's happening in the nature, while we understand it in this simplified form that our body is reflecting air, space, fire, water, and earth in a functional way inside our body, we can utilize different elements and different aspects of nature, including plants, different food items, or activities, and then try and balance these five elements using those by understanding what's the balance between these three functions. So, in ideal state, in a good healthy person, what we want to achieve is a balance between movement, metabolism, and nourishment, where a person's movement, metabolism, and nourishment helps each other and helps maintain one another in a perfect fashion. That's considered to be the equilibrium. It's not the only form of equilibrium possible, but in an Ayurvedic way, this is the equilibrium. This is the definition of equilibrium. And once this movement, metabolism, and nourishment, or vata, pitta, kapha, is in good balance, we understand that it reflects in our digestive capacity, our immunity, our circulation. It doesn't have to be specifically mentioned, but it also reflects on our mind, emotions, our ability to deal with different stress factors, and any imbalance towards one of these, or many times a combination of these, will put us into risk of responding in a certain fashion, which we will be able to predict that, yes, I have an imbalance towards one of this dosha, and I will respond to these kinds of situation in a certain way, which will be different. So I will go into um, each dosha to give you a little bit more idea about what each one of those do in our body. So let's go back to Vata. Vata is the one which is related to movements, air and space. Now, when we say air or space, when we try to analyze what's air or space, it's something not just moving. There are other qualities or other functions which you can see in air and space. Air and space is quite light. It is always dry. It is cold. There are certain qualities that are related to this air and space element. So when we see that vata qualities are increasing in the body, these qualities of movement or the functions of movement that we experience comes together with these other qualities. For example, let's take the feeling of coldness. Like some of us may feel cold very easily. Some of us may actually feel more comfortable in a cooler weather. But all of us are exactly the same body temperature. Otherwise, when somebody checks your temperature, they'll consider that you have some illness or something's going wrong. In a healthy person, all of us, ideally 36.7, that sort of range should be your temperature. But some of us do still feel cold. Why? Now, if we look at that, then we will understand what vata means and the coldness in vata means. The vata coldness is not about reduced core body temperature. It's mostly about how temperature is flowing through the body, how the circulation makes an efficient transfer of core heat developed in our digestive system, in our muscular tissue, and move it to the extremities, to our hands and feet and ear and scalp, so that we stay warm, we feel warm. Now, if the movement gets affected, then our body struggles in making that transfer of heat, and our hands and feet feels colder much easily. And if you have an imbalance related to air, what we see is the quality of coldness increase in vata, the quality of dryness also increase, and that's not purely because of body temperature dropping or you getting dehydrated in itself. It is because that movement and transfer of this heat and moisture is inefficient. So even if you drink too much of water, because your body is imbalanced towards vata, the water actually gets eliminated, or your body is unable to retain most of it. So the effect of it will be seen in functions. The functions will be mostly related to in vata will be related to feeling cold, and the coldness is not just, like I said, um, drop in temperature. It's more related to the circulation. Another effect of this coldness is our digestion. Like so many people try different forms of fasting, and nowadays the biggest trend is intermittent fasting. Everybody is trying to eat early in the evening and maybe skip breakfast, or do the other way around. But what I feel to I think 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of the conversation was about having very small meals, many number or many times in a day, and that was considered to be healthy. So this keeps changing, but I would say that in Vata, the coldness also affect the digestive fire, and the ability to digest anything too heavy at the same time will be slightly diminished. So anything too heavy, oily, heavy to digest will make the person feel lethargic, too heavy, and the absorption and the metabolism will not be at its optimum level. So that is also a manifestation of coldness along with the effect on circulation, which means that intermittent fasting in this form might not be ideal. If you are purely tilting towards a vata imbalance, you might need more small, easy to digest, warm, simple foods, but multiple time during the day. So I'm giving you some examples to understand the effect of these qualities and functions. Now, generally, how an imbalance of vata, I'm talking about a real imbalance which has been there in the body for some time, causing trouble. What sort of trouble can we expect? This is the prediction part of it. Vata, like I said, is like air, cold and dry. The dryness usually manifests not just in the skin. So skin will be one of the places it will manifest. It can create dry eyes, dryness in the mouth. Any mucous membrane, any part of the body can experience dryness. Internally, vata can create dryness inside our colon, along with the lack of that movement related function. It can easily create bloatedness, gas developing, distension in the abdomen. It can create constipation tendency, or pellet like stools, or any form of dryness can develop externally or inside the body when vata imbalance happens. Vata also can create, we're predicting, if it's not taken care, it can create dryness in the cartilage. It can create dryness in the joints. So initially you might notice it as a clicking sound from the joints, or when you move your neck in the morning, you feel a creaky sort of a sound. If that's sort of increasing, if that sort of appears suddenly, it usually indicates that the body is becoming dry internally, and that can create issues related to degenerative bone conditions, and if not taken care, can move on to other inflammatory joint related issues. So movements and joints can get affected. Our mind becomes also quite dry and light, which is very hard to actually understand how the mind and the thoughts become dry and light. It's not that physical dryness, it's the lightness which will be more expressed in the mind, that the mind will be quite agitated, moving from one thought to another quite quickly, can feel worried, can feel anxious and panicky about different things, and could be influenced by every stimulus that is coming towards us. Any stress can feel a bit more in its impact in our mind if vata is out of balance, and that would reflect on the ability to relax and get into a good rest and sleep. It can also create issues related to say quality of sleep can be reduced. Memory can get sort of we feel a little bit difficult to recollect, because not because the retention is lesser, because the attention will be lesser. Mind is moving too fast to absorb the information, so recollecting will become equally difficult. So all of these are signs of a vata imbalance that is going on for some time. And once we understand these, or see one of these, usually an Ayurvedic doctor tries to see whether you are showing a general imbalance towards vata, and then starts prescribing a diet and activity routine. And I will now tell you what sort of diet and activity routine generally helps with vata. We are sticking on to each dosha initially. Once we understand it a little bit, then we can um, sort of think together maybe how combinations or changes between the dosha would influence. Right now we'll focus on simple scenarios of each dosha. So vata imbalance, we know it's air and space and dryness and coldness manifesting in the body in different ways. So what would be the solutions? The solutions usually is very simple. It's usually opposite to the qualities that we are experiencing. To counterbalance, the idea is to bring equilibrium. So if we see a diminishing uh, oiliness or increase in dryness, we are trying to increase the oily intake within the body and try and balance it off, and doing that mindfully. So in Vata imbalance specifically, the quality being coldness, the first method I would recommend to balance the cold tendency is to use more warming kind of a diet. And warming diet is not hot food itself. Warming diet would mean that the diet includes some warming spices. It includes ginger and garlic and black pepper and cumin, different spices that we would use in cooking that can help ignite the digestive fire, warm up the body, and also help with the circulation in general. The coldness also would mean that we need some form of support to our circulation. So the best method to do that is through activities and exercises, oil application, and all of them focusing towards a um, improving that movement and flow of our circulation rather than focusing too much on say burning calories or straining the body. It's more sort of a flow or gentle movements usually help with the coldness in Vata. For the dryness aspect, we recommend use of healthy oils in the diet, and that doesn't mean to have oily and too heavy food. It can be in the form of nuts and seeds, oily fish if you have fish. You can have some milk products if you are used to and comfortable with milk. The most simplest way is to take ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. Nowadays, it's available in supermarkets everywhere quite easily. Including ghee is known to be quite effective in nourishing the joints and improving the cartilages and helping the colon function, cleansing action, all of that. So use of ghee is recommended. If you are not comfortable or not used to ghee, you can use olive oil. So any healthy oil in generous quantity is always helpful. Like I mentioned earlier, not just for the circulation, generally for that dryness tendency, applying oil externally is also very effective. Uh, what I usually say in terms of dryness is oils are only one part of the solution. The most easiest solution is hydration. But the problem in Vata is that because the natural tendency is feeling cold, there will be always an affinity towards warm liquids rather than cold plain water. Now the problem is most of the warm liquid that we consume will be either coffee or tea, which are not actually really hydrating in nature. They actually are mild diuretics and they actually flush out more water than you actually take. So if your Vata tendency is high and you are craving for warm liquids, be mindful that you have a herbal tea or just warm water. And also when you're having herbal tea also, have it really as a very weak tea rather than having it too, um, say one or two tea bag in a cup. Instead of that, it's good to have a liter with a single tea bag so that it's quite light, but its flavor is there and its effect is there, and it's also equally hydrating. So dry and cold and taking care of it through hydration, use of oils externally and internally, use of healthy oily oils in the diet. These are simple ways of taking care of vata through food. Through activity, like I mentioned, too much of agitating running or any form of high intensity activity may not be always suitable when you have vata imbalance. It has to be ideally more grounding, more gentle activities. The focus has to be on improving concentration, improving stability so that the mind is able to stay still and maintain the body balance. So yoga is usually good. Pilates is usually quite effective. Try and avoid anything that is too agitating, and too much loud music and all might not be suitable for vata related imbalance when you're doing a exercise. Now coming to pitta. Pitta, we I hope vata was fairly clear. Took me about 5.5 years to learn this. So if you don't understand some part of it or feel it is confusing, it's a genuine feeling we all go through while studying something so old. So uh, Pitta dosha is the transformation. It's the function related to our metabolism, our digestion, enzymes, hormones. So the, now we understand the function of pitta. The signs of imbalance will be related to these. So most common signs are uh, fiery, like heartburn or acidic tendencies, or silent reflux, which can manifest as constant cough or throat irritation. It can create headaches, mostly triggered by heat. Heat in the sense it can be direct sunlight or too much hot climate suddenly changing towards heat, right, like right now. Heat can be because of anger also. It doesn't have to be physically the temperature. So anything frustration or direct heat, or certain foods which are known to be quite warming, like alcohol, uh, can actually increase the acidic tendency and quite easily create headache, acid reflux, rashes, or sudden appearance of redness on the skin when you consume certain kind of food or exposed to certain heat elements. That's also a sign of pitta imbalance. Pitta in the mind can create a lot of frustration or reactive tendency, where it's not like vata where it's constant worrying. It's more sort of like a eruptions of sudden anger or frustration, or reacting to situations can happen with pitta. Pitta is usually very much related to our overall metabolic function, our balancing of our hormones. So any issues related to pitta in female can manifest as issues related to the menstrual cycles. It can create irregularities. Usually an increase in pitta creates an excess of flow in the cycles, and create more sort of irregularity rather than reduction of flow. Pitta can create burning sensation and redness anywhere in the body. In fact, joints or the skin can be quite sensitive to products or different heaty acidic foods, and that usually shows us a sign that the person might have pitta imbalance and might get issues related to hormones, or metabolic imbalance, functions related to thyroid, functions related to our liver. And metabolic liver is the metabolic powerhouse where most of the core metabolic functions are happening, functions related to our colon. So all of these can be assumed by understanding that these tendencies are more prevalent. And solution wise, the like with vata we did opposite to dry and cold. With pitta, the predominant quality that we experience is heat or acidic sort of nature. So um, heat is again, like in the case of vata, it's not about temperature. It's more about certain food that you consume that will make you feel warm. These food can be, say, a cup of hot chocolate, or it can be coffee, it can be alcohol. There are certain foods that we know will make us feel warm, which is good for us in a cold weather when we are exposed to cold, or if we are not having an imbalance towards pitta. Those kinds of food should be ideally avoided, and things which are cooling. So most commonly we recommend aloe vera in any form internally, as aloe vera juice, or if you get fresh aloe vera, that can also be consumed. The internal flesh of it, you can freeze it also if you have a big leaf, and take a little bit of it every day. Aloe vera application externally is also quite cooling and nourishing. Coconut in various forms: coconut water, coconut flesh, coconut milk, coconut sugar. All of these are considered to be quite cooling and pitta balancing in nature. It's good to have the usual green leafy vegetables and lots of fruits and fresh fruits. All of these are considered to be cooling by nature, and we see that it's mostly available also during summer season, and that's the time where we should consume it, because it is naturally cooling. That's what the nature provides us. So pitta usually gets better with all these cooling activities, cooling diet. Activity wise, pitta imbalance usually, like vata tendency, it doesn't have to be that gentle and focused on just the concentration and calming down aspect. That's also important, but at the same time, I think for pitta, cooling literally is very good. So water activities are highly recommended. Nowadays, I think unless you have a pool of your own, it'll be very difficult with the current lockdown situation. But try and stay cool, and if you like to actually swim, if there are outdoor areas which are safe to do, then you should explore that. You should enroll in once we are back to say somewhat normal situation. If you are able to, aquatic activities are considered to be really good for pitta dosha. Pitta dosha benefits from cooling activities. So not sort of ideal to do a run in the middle of the day. If you like to run, also try and do it early morning or slightly later in the day when the sun is not too strong, so that you are not actually exposing too much heat, especially in the summer time. Pitta usually benefits from certain breathing exercises and activities that are also calming and grounding in nature, and will also have impact on the hormones, the metabolism, digestion, all of that. It's not just for that feeling of coldness and heat. It's all for the general impact of pitta, which is in metabolism and all transformation related function. The third, kapha is water and earth, more oily and more sort of heavy by nature. Kapha tendency usually creates that excess oiliness in the body. So externally, you might see skin becoming more oily or acne prone. There can be tendency towards fat deposition in the body, gaining weight, water retention. All of these are signs of kapha increasing, and kapha can also create that mucousy tendency in the respiratory system. So shortness of breath or tendency towards constant allergies or constant uh, colds and sinus infections or anything like upper respiratory tract or breathing related issues. These are signs of a kapha imbalance. Any one of these usually prompts an Ayurvedic doctor to take some steps to take care of it so that it doesn't go into other issues. And with this current pandemic also, we see that obesity and weight gain is somewhat related to a high sort of vulnerability with this particular virus attack. So sorts of show that we need to be aware that kapha tendency comes with a respiratory sort of risk which we need to take care. And diet-wise solution for kapha tendency is opposite to that oily, heavy nature. So when we spoke about vata and intermittent fasting, for a kapha tendency person or once a person is having an imbalance towards kapha, intermittent fasting will be really good and highly recommended. So eating in a certain time, preferably between 10 and 2, is considered to be ideal, where the digestive fire will be strongest. Towards the evening, keep it light or avoid too much of heavy food. Keep it mostly liquid intake, and in the morning also you can keep it quite light. Diet wise, kapha is highly it responds very vigorously towards milk products and things which are too oily and heavy. So dairy products are not highly recommended for kapha in any form. The only dairy product recommended for kapha will be buttermilk, which is a light yogurty preparation, which is fermented and quite sort of light to take. Other than that, most milk products are best to avoid. Grains also try and keep it minimum, especially towards the evening time near to your sleep. Try and avoid pasta or bread or things which are heavy uh, from grains. It's best to have more digestive spices in your diet, like vata. Kapha also has a tendency to be cold and oily, so we need more digestive spices like ginger and garlic and black pepper. All of these are quite good for kapha activity. Generally, because of that heavy nature, kapha usually can do strenuous activities, but find it difficult to initiate and get into some form of activity. The ability to do will be quite good. Um, so it's important to initiate and get into a invigorating routine, especially in the morning. Get into a routine where there is some form of stretching and sort of breathing exercises, something to set the tone for the day, and then it's quite easy to actually get into a activity routine and maintain it. And once you get into the activity, kapha will find it quite effective, and it's quite sort of a pleasurable experience compared to Vata, who will like to move, who will like to run, but the effect of running might be actually quite depleting and may feel tired too much. Whereas Kapha, if you run for a few, like half an hour, 40 minutes, you'll actually feel quite invigorated and may feel like you can keep doing it for a long time. So it's that initiation should be there. Breathing exercises are quite important to activate, and preferably in the morning where we set the tone for the day. Nowadays, I think it's even more important to get into a routine and give a good start to your day, and that start will reflect on the rest of the day naturally. You don't have to actually uh, think about each and everything. If you are giving a very good start to the day with good intention towards setting a good routine, that usually reflects onto the rest of the day. So we explained about the three doshas. We looked at how each of these reflect onto us. You have done this questionnaire. Some of you have got it and might have done it. It has a slightly complex sort of a results part to understand what's your dosha. But the idea behind it is to not look at those names. I want each one of you listening to this chat to not worry about Vata Pitta Kapha and try and sort of ignore it after talking about this so much and focus on those quality: dry, oily, cold, and heat, and see which of them are being predominant. If your body is showing tendency towards more heat, then it definitely makes sense to avoid acidic food, avoid coffee, avoid apple cider vinegar or anything, even if it's considered healthy and good. Your body might benefit from more cooling ingredients. And if you're seeing tendency towards dryness, then it definitely makes sense to have healthy oils in your diet. It doesn't make sense to worry about cholesterol and avoid all the oils and stick to a salad based diet, considering that's healthy, when you have an imbalance which is tilting towards dry and cold, which means that you will have to include more warm, cooked, oil rich diet, healthy oils in good quantity regularly in your diet. So look at those qualities and see where you're tilting to. When you answer it based on what's happening right now, you will see where you're tilting at the moment. Don't worry about using this questionnaire to analyze what's your nature and how your body has behaved throughout this time. Try and look at what's happening today at this present moment. And when you keep doing that, you will realize that without using a questionnaire, without answering different aspects, you can easily see that your body tells you certain things, and that does actually make sense to focus on a holistic approach when you see dryness on your skin. Rather than just applying oil or moisturizer on the skin, you also observe whether you are hydrating enough, whether you are taking some nuts and seeds in your diet, whether you are having mostly warm and cooked preparations, or you're just having more dry and cold preparations. So it makes sense to look at the each symptoms in a more holistic way. That's the idea behind that questionnaire. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm still within time. I see Stella appearing there. So I'm going to sort of slowly conclude and give opportunity if you have any questions to ask now.